I think it's time to start with the panel, so I invite to all the keynotes to come here to stay in the table, and to Xavier Albaladejo, who will be the moderator of the panel. Xavier Albaladejo is one of the most well-known people in Spain in Agile topics. He's now working at Everest. It's the same company than Alberto, and he will be the moderator of the panel. So thank you, Xavi, for being here with us for the panel and to moderate the panel. Thank you.
Well, I don't know where.
I'll move out of the way.
Thank you. Okay, if you want, we can start. And I would like to start with a question. I would like to know what is the if you can name only identify what are the main difficulties or pitfalls that a company can encounter with starting with Agile in big projects. And I would like only to, in your answer, only to identify 2 or 3 pitfalls, and after that, my intention is develop all these topics in order of priority, or maybe what you have seen more important. And if you want to start, Alberto, for example.
At least I have one. Probably we can develop 2 more, and we have the 3 main pitfalls. But I was thinking on the reflection that on the thinkings and the thoughts of Alan when we were thinking about Agile and how companies they adopt this methodology, so this approach, and what I think is that the main pitfall is the willing to do that. I mean, it's quite difficult, and I've seen a lot of times when doing projects in companies that is getting with the right message to get to the right person in the company to understand which are the benefits of Agile, and I don't know if you agree with that, but I think once you understand that, I think it's quite easy to get or to make yourself a picture of where Agile can help you. But the main problem, and I can see it every day in in our customers and some of our customers, is that it's quite difficult for them to translate this principle, which sometimes they think about software development only and try to translate it to real projects where they have real deadlines and some of the thoughts about, okay, but we don't have things defined until the next iteration, whatever. So that's the main difficulty. And once, I mean, the other pitfalls maybe will be important, and I can think about that. But this is my first one and the big one. I don't know what you think about.
So I agree with that one. So let me choose a different one just to add to it. Maybe it's related to this. The situations that I've seen where there's the most struggle is where there's a lot of attention on the development aspects and how Agile will affect development, but not on the rest of the organization. particularly around, as I mentioned, the project management, project delivery, and also as you get to some of the upper management, their expectations around agility are a little overblown, shall we say. So they think that what this means is that two things. They have a fear on one side that it means there's no planning, that they've got no documentation, that there's no schedule that anybody keeps to, which of course is incorrect. It cannot be delivered that way. And on the other side, they think that there's complete flexibility now to change things halfway through a project completely, and because you're agile, you can react to it, which also is incorrect, because you work usually in a fairly constrained context where some agility can be applied, but there's constraints on that agility. So to me, it's that. It's not that we can't do very interesting and important things in the development stages to be agile. It's that it doesn't get understood and applied around the project management and delivery aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when organizations embark on doing the agile stuff on large projects, you end up with that thing that, I don't know, one way to characterize it would be to call it cargo cult. You know, these people after the Second World War in the Pacific, they had seen a bonanza arriving in their island with all these Americans and their ships and their airplanes landing on their islands and leaving all kind of good stuff. And then it stops, you know, in 1945. But they continue to sort of think that if they do some kind of control tower and airfields, airplanes are going to come again and bring all kind of goodies. So sometimes you see that in software projects. You know, we're just going to do all the good things that are in the books, and good things are going to happen to us. But they're not really that reflective, as I hinted this morning. They're not really that reflective on what good does it do to us in our circumstances. So there's this naive belief that if we do the right thing as described, we'll be successful. It's a promise in some ways of. I've seen the same thing with RUP, you know, 10 years earlier. You know, let's do all the good things that are described in RUP, you know, and let's deliver all the artifacts. Let's distribute all the templates and fill them. When all the templates are filled, we'll be done. But it's just, you know, a naive belief that things happen just because you do all the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that the company like Telefonica indeed really willing to do agile, but we feel that many of the managers don't know how to manage many of the aspects of the projects. They don't know how to do a new contract more specific to agile. They don't know how to measure, to have a current metric of the quality. They have a lot of doubts about how to manage that kind of projects. But indeed, when we ask to them, they are willing to do agile, but because they are thinking about the agile thing is going to get a much more short time to market. That's the principal idea they have in the mind, I think.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think we can do to overcome to all of these maybe pitfalls we can encounter? Only it's a question of having plans, it's a question of having metrics, or there is other things we can do, or maybe it's the way we have to deal with planning in large projects. What do you think it would be the thing that will help more to a company to start with Agile in big projects?
Maybe I can make a comment, because also the comment you made, I think, is a very important one about management. So it's about education, I think, as much as it's about anything else. But one interesting thing is with some managers who say, we want to go agile, this is the way forward. It's very interesting to say, okay, what are you willing to give up to focus on time to market? Because there's no free lunch here. What will you give up? If I'm going to deliver something faster and more frequently, will you give up quality? So we'll release it faster, more frequently, but with less quality. Is that okay? No, I don't like that. Okay. We'll work more with higher risk because we're going to change things more frequently and the requirements won't be stable from the beginning. So planning will be much more difficult. Is that okay? No, we have to work to our plans. We got our budgets and our deadlines, okay? So we're going to have much more stakeholder interaction. So it used to be very nice. We would work with you for a few weeks, go away for 6 months, come back with a product and you say, no, we hate this, and we go away again. But now you're going to have to come and see us every week for demos, to redefine the priorities of the project, to get involved in the whole team thinking. Is that okay? No, we're kind of busy. We can't be spending all that. So what do you want to do? You think it's just magically going to happen? So you have to start to make it very concrete so that they see that there's implications on them, on what you have to do, on how you manage, on the way you look at scheduling, and come to some agreement. And I think this is part of what Philippe, I think, was saying. For each organization, the answers to that will be quite different because you have different managers, different situations, different domains. So I think it's education as much as anything.
I was thinking in two things. When we first started talking about the main pitfalls, we shouldn't forget about the background, the inertia of the companies to work in a specific way. I mean, this is not easy to change, and that ties to the second point that you pointed at this time. It's maybe the way of the companies that came by the agile approaches. Maybe I don't know if it sounds like a joke, but it's like a stealth agile. It's go with the benefits first. I mean, if you say to your product manager that I'm going to deliver frequent releases of the solution, more frequent and so on, I think this is visible. But if I say, okay, I'm going to apply agile, I think it's quite difficult to understand to the companies that which are going to be the benefits. I mean, it's I think once you understand what the benefits is going to provide you, everyone buys this approach. That you have to turn it into business terminology and to talk about return of investment and so on, because this is where we first start the projects, where you talk about product portfolio, or you talk about projects, you talk about investment and return of value and so on. I think this is the main driver. Is maybe not talk about the methodology. We're going to do RUP, or we're going to do whatever. So talk about the concepts that everyone uses in every day.
Very often at the management level, people are very unclear as to why they want to be agile. They want to be agile. You know, that's the first question I ask them, maybe not always so bluntly. When a medium-sized company in Vancouver said, oh, we've decided, you know, at the last management meeting that we're going to embrace agile. And I say, why? And they're stunned by the question. But I don't understand. You're the president of Agile Vancouver and you're asking why. I said, yes. Why do you want to be agile? What do you want to do? XP or Scrum? But because everybody does it. Because, or some vague promises. We've heard that we could reduce our time to delivery by 60%. I don't know where they get that, but okay. There's probably somebody who's posted something like that on a blog somewhere. Try to analyze why. Where is the pain for you? Try to see how to fix the pain for you. Don't assume that Agile is going to fix by miracle the pain. It's like, you know, okay, let's distribute drugs to everybody. You know, you don't know what it's going to fix, but okay, take it just in case. You know, so very often the motivation is extremely weird. It was one of my few first slides. Sort of, we Agile because it would look good on our resume, because all the developers have been to the Agile Vancouver working groups on Tuesday nights and they like it, so we're going to be agile. But that's not enough of a motivation. So usually you have to go back to what is the pain for you? Where is the real pain that you want to solve? And maybe some agile practice could solve your real pain, but you don't need to change everything. And there's this naive belief sometimes that we're going to abandon everything we're doing to jump on the unknown that we may have tried on a little 3-people, 3-week project, and that's it. You know, this is the recipe. So sometimes it's, you know, you have to drive your eyes open. You cannot just drive your eyes closed, hoping that you'll get somewhere.
And in from your experience, have you ever need to use economic figures or financial figures to justify the need of being more agile? Or maybe it's a conviction of people. They believe that they will work better in this way, but they don't know what is the return of investment.
Yes.
I think it depends on whether you're talking with. I mean, from my experience, technical areas are more willing to change the way they develop software. But management areas probably are more used to manage they are more used to the way the projects go, because it's the information the projects the outputs of the projects and the information they provide are probably more aligned with the way the traditional projects go. So I think it depends on whether you are talking with.
Mm-hmm.
But for almost all the projects I can think of that we're involved in, we have to do an ROI.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to spend money on technology or advice from Rational. We have to do an ROI. We have to do some sort of business case. And of all the fancy things that we do and super spreadsheets and all that stuff, it usually comes down to 2 or 3 very simple things. You'll have less meetings because you'll be better connected and have more real-time information. So instead of 5 hours of meetings per week, it's 2 hours. That will save you 3 hours where you can do productive work, and you can put some numbers around that. The second thing is we can help you to reduce effort in things like now you have 2 people just to do builds at the end of the week, or to automate testing because now you've got a person whose full-time job is to make sure all the tests got run, or to check every morning that the tests were run and to send the results to somebody. We can automate those. That will reduce headcount by 1 person of a team of 20. And the third one is we can improve your decision making. Now we believe that 50% of the time you make decisions based on bad data from information filled in spreadsheets that people either knowingly or unknowingly got wrong, and it's from the day before. Now you can have up-to-date data to make decisions, and you'll make better decisions 10% of the time. That will mean less scrap and rework. But so you do things like that,
Mm-hmm.
and you know it's not rocket science. In fact, it's almost embarrassing when you say it like that. But that's what you put on the spreadsheets, and that's the kind of stuff that gets rolled up and says by investing $1 million with Rational, we'll save $5 million over the next 2 years. But you have to do that, right?
While it's sort of not easy, but it's feasible to have a return on investment analysis by buying Rational tools, it's very difficult to do that for Agile. You know, we're going to be Agile because you cannot detangle Agile from all the rest. You cannot detangle the part that is allocated to the tools, the part that is allocated to the people and their time, the part that is allocated to the change of workflows. It's very difficult to detangle. So I don't have any concrete economic data that is really trustable and reliable that can sort of, you know, not only prove the case, but that can be applied to different case for just agile methods.
Mm-hmm.
We just apply it to the tools, and then it makes it easier.
Yeah.
Because we sell tools.
Yeah.
So it must be the tools, right? QED.
What do you think about having a minimum metric that is, for example, complexity, and start to measure the complexity that a team solves every month without using Agile, then transforming the process, and for example with the Scrum and XP, and measuring this metric every month to see if there is an increase. Maybe why I'm thinking on this metric, because it's money. In the end, it's money. How many business value per month, how many complexity, how many productivity, how increases. How do you think about this metric?
Maybe complexity in the strict, McCabe matrix or something like that is not the appropriate one, but some more complex aggregate metric of the general intrinsic quality of your code, the kind of thing that you can do with tools like Sonar or the tool suite that was developed by a software improvement group in the Netherlands and things like that. Something that will give you some ideas about the intrinsic quality of your code can help in part. But again, it will be very difficult to correlate that to some of the agile practices. And you could actually demonstrate that, it has very little to do with the agile practices. That you can get very high level of maintainability of your code by using something that looks totally anti-agile. So the correlation is hard to demonstrate, and it always ends up being some kind of act of faith. I want to believe that it's because we are agile that we get all this improvement.
But I wouldn't underplay that. I think it's important that we understand that a lot of these changes are acts of faith. Because in the end, you have to say, we believe we're producing more software more effectively with fewer people, and it's more of what the customers want. And unless you can somehow show that, you'll never get investment. And a lot of these situations are, unfortunately, more acts of faith than based on good data. And it's just the way the world is.
Yeah, I was also thinking that maybe complexity is something which is more related with the project, regardless the methodology or the method you're going to apply to develop the project. A project is going to be complex by definition, more complex or less complex in regard to which technologies are involved and so on. I think the quality measure is good, and also there must be a way, and I think that's the key to measure the success of the Agile, is how you the risk reduction, less bugs or less. Yeah, I think that's a starting point. I mean, you are trying to do most frequent integrations. You're trying to deliver your product more frequently. So there must be a risk reduction. We were seeing some charts Alan showed us that back in production environment, the costs that they have, back in the development environment, the costs that they have. So at the end, if you measure the investment required to rewrite or redo or correct some things on the project, I think this is one of the points where Agile should make a difference.
I think there are lots of things that people are doing. We have one company that has created what they call a developer productivity index. So every person every month gets measured on this index. And it's a combination of things that is about how much stuff they're producing, how much complexity is in the stuff, and what problems it's solving. And they produce this complex index that they believe gives them some measure. But as the question that I perhaps answered much too long about metrics said, I think it depends what you're trying to do as to which of these metrics is going to be most valuable. So for example, one of the most important things for us was about morale, how people feel inside Rational. And the reason that we had numbers 4 years ago or so as they were was as much about the people and their attitude to their job as it was about the tools or the process. And I believe that's very different now. Of course, there's still issues in various places, but it's very different than it was 4 or 5 years ago. People are working in a different way, they're enjoying more about what they're doing, and consequently you could argue therefore they produce better stuff. But how to make that relationship is very difficult.
And people are extremely creative in gaming the metrics. I still remember this project in the 80s where Jim Trowalter from Rational was involved, where some managers had decided to look at productivity in terms of lines of code, and in C it was counting semicolons. So they just decided to put 2 semicolons at the end of each statement. The numbers look pretty nice for a while.
Double their productivity. But you're right. Whenever there's a system, people will look for ways to overcome it.
We in Telefónica doesn't know which metric are good for us. We feel that we need some kind of metric that be able to capture the real value of the business, but we have no idea which one will be better. I feel that no one related with the internal structure of the code will be good enough to measure any of this kind of value. So we are testing several different kind of metrics but I have no idea what's the core doing.
So do you know this, sorry, do you know this little triangle they often do in business schools, which say, when you look at your own organization, the top of the triangle is customer intimacy, how well you know your customer. One side is how efficient you are, and the other side is how innovative you are. And you sort of say where you want to be. Do you want to be the best at knowing your customer, therefore you can be close to them and sell them the best things? Do you want to be as efficient as you can, so you'll do whatever you can to cut costs? Or do you want to be as innovative? We're going to do the latest thing first on the market and get first market mover advantage. And you sort of say where you think you are. And I think depending on that, you optimize and you measure completely different. You think about Agile completely differently, depending on which of those you believe you are. And it may not be static. It may not even be the same for each part of the organization. So I think this is why some of the things that were being said here become really important. If you think your organization is in business because you're first to the market and you're innovative, you'll measure some things very different than if we're efficient, we're not the first to the market, but by God, we'll be the cheapest. You do things completely differently. So I think this is why it's complicated.
Anyway, we shouldn't forget that one of the motivations for this kind of approach is based on increasing the customer satisfaction and so we can start from that point. I mean, an agile project should increase, should improve the customer satisfaction, and this is something that can be measured in terms of the involvement of the customer, in terms of the alignment with the expectations of the product. Of course, there are grays and there are situations where, well, your customer didn't exactly know the requirements were difficult to define. But in those situations is where Agile should help the projects. And a standard approach to a project should be more risky than an Agile, which doesn't mean that always 10% is going to be a difference. I don't know if...
Yeah, well, I'm still perplexed. How do I measure customer satisfaction when I look at all the software that ends up in a paper mill? The quality of the toilet paper that you unroll in your washroom, I don't know. It's pretty hard to correlate to...
Well, I was not talking about toilet paper anyway.
No, the problem is there are many customers in that situation.
Yeah.
And they all have very different needs.
It's a good example of, there are certain niche where things are relatively obvious. And then when you stray away from those niche, the agile, even the jargon that we use, customer satisfaction, start to lose meaning. It's pretty hard to transpose that into customer satisfaction.
Well, at least we know what is not customer satisfaction.
Especially in toilet paper.
Especially
in toilet paper. I'm sorry.
Okay. And I would like to, going back to the topic of the panel, is how to help companies start using Agile in big projects. I would like to have some kind of actions that maybe some people could use tomorrow in their companies. For example, what kind of things they would have to start to do so as to prepare themselves, or so as to start from a good point with big projects.
There are some low-hanging fruits. There are certain practices that are relatively easy to embark on, and they require relatively little training and education. They may require some kind of a familiarization period. If you look at things like pair programming or developing systematic unit testing and things like that, those are relatively low level and are pretty easy to grab, and they are probably going to help in some ways any kind of project. After that, I would be very cautious in trying the big bang, let's change everything at once. You know, just find a few things where you can bring some significant change, bring that change in, let it sink, reflect on it, refine it, and then bring the other change. So maybe you have a problem around quality and testing, then fix that. Don't try to fix everything at the same time by embarking on too many practices on a 50 or 100 people organization. It's easy to do all kind of changes in a 6-10 people organization, but when you are pretty large, focus on where you can get some real value and try to do a good job there rather than spread your effort into changing everything. I would have said something different 10 years ago if you had asked me, but I've seen now too many organizations trying to do the big bang change and suffering from it for too long. And when you analyze what's going on, maybe you needed to do this, maybe you didn't need to do that, maybe there was just a few things that you should have focused on. And maybe if you can focus on one and do a significant change in one, you'll be better off than trying to change everything in the way you develop software at once, including buying all the tools from my colleagues.
Thank you. So I have a simple answer to this. So if you're going back to your project tomorrow, maybe some of you are going back tonight if you've still got work to do, whether you're doing COBOL on a mainframe, C++, Java, whatever you're doing. So this is what the answer that I give when I'm asked this. Go and challenge your team in 5 areas. First of all, challenge them to produce more working software on more of a regular basis. So if currently you produce software every 6 months, is there a way you can do it every 3? If you're currently doing every month, can you do it every week? Is there a way you can get some working software to demonstrate progress more quickly? Whatever the context is, that will determine what more quickly means and what working means. Maybe it's a simulation, maybe it's something else, but get something working, hopefully the software, on a more regular basis. Second thing, try and get testing done as early as you can. We all know the benefits of testing early. Try and do testing as early as you can. Try and do continuous testing of your system as you go along. The more you can push that, the better. If you're doing software in the nose cone of a missile versus an insurance app versus a web app for iPhone, it's different. But try and push testing as early as you can and get some testing done early to see the results. The third thing, get some stakeholder input. Don't wait 6 months to show them what they asked for 6 months ago. If it's 3 months ago, make it a month. If it's every week, try and see if you can get earlier input from them. Push your stakeholders to get more input any way you can. And again, stakeholder may mean a lot of different things. So again, you're going to have to be maybe inventive about what a stakeholder means. Fourth thing, look at the way in which you're governing your team and make sure it's appropriate. Don't force a large-scale structure on a team if it's not necessary. Don't give teams freedom when they need some structure. You're going to have to start to revisit what the framework is around them for what governance means and what control means in their context. And that it might change over time, because as you get to different stages of a project, it changes. And finally, measure something. Measure it regularly, and measure something you're going to do something about. So if you're not measuring anything, pick something. If you measure something, make sure it's appropriate and that you're using something to drive some behaviors. But measure something and use it as a device for you. And if you do those things, in my view, you are being agile. You are being more agile when you do those things than when you didn't. And it doesn't mean you have to buy our tools or anybody else's tools, but you have to change the way you work in your group.
I have to admit that systematic regression testing, that required some fancy tool.
Yeah.
Good configuration management on a distributed team, that requires some fancy tool.
And I can sell you one of those.
Thank you.
Some of these definitely need some support.
About the fourth point, you say that you have to restructure your team, or maybe
your process.
Your process.
How you govern and manage and coordinate the team can be different, of course, for each team, but it also varies through the life of a project.
Yeah.
Again, something we learned to our cost was that.
Yeah. But in which kind of things are you thinking about reorganizing the process? Which kind of...
So simple things like at the beginning of the project, you give lots of freedom to be inventive. Towards the end, you better be more bolted down about approvals and who can change things. So it will change how freedoms go between the teams, who can communicate with who can change things, who can look at things. It may vary quite a lot. How you look at the results. Maybe at the beginning of a project you run some scans just to see where you are. But if it fails a scan because it's too high complexity, maybe you just give a warning. Maybe later in the project you say, no, fix that. It still works, but I'm not happy that it's that complex right now. We've got to start to refactor. But different things like that.
One of the things that you mentioned can be expressed in different ways by the proponents of lean approach is reducing the amount of work in progress. Your first point was about that. If I can show things running at a shorter interval, that means I will tackle less in design and implementation. I will have less work in progress at any point in time. And that's probably a good lesson, if only one that we can learn from lean manufacturing, is let's minimize work in progress, which doesn't mean that we minimize work overall. We may end up delivering the same thing, but work in progress at some point in time is reduced, which reduce complexity in our heads, the number of things that we have to run after, the number of things that get blocked, the number of the multiplexing that I have to do in my day. So that's the general feel, reducing work in progress.
That's a good sign.
And when talking about training, that it's the first thing you have said. I think maybe it's not only a question of training. Maybe you are talking about we are talking about the same, but I see that coaching the teams, it's really important because it's from my point of view, because the change it's so much difficult sometimes. It's not only a question of changing processes and changing tools, changing mentality, changing the culture. What do you think about the necessity of having a coaching process or coaching first step to enter to this change to Agile?
I don't want to hug the microphone, I'm sorry. I think it's critical. So we're in a situation right now with a large bank where they've done some pilots. They kind of think it's going to work for them. And they say, okay, in 2011, we want to roll this out to 1,000 people in 50 teams. What training and coaching do we need? It's actually not an easy question to answer because there's such a variety of people and projects. There are some guys who've been hacking COBOL for 20 years. There's some new guys who are doing web-based front ends. So trying to put together a scheme around this is actually quite complicated. Which training you need for which kinds of folks, and what ratio of coaches do you need to projects, and when is the project ready to start and when isn't it? So it's a very complicated question, I think. But the coaching and the training is essential. And through the pilots, one of the lessons has certainly been that we hadn't done enough thinking about the coaching, particularly for projects that are more maintenance style versus new development. So we've had to come up with different ways of looking at that for different classes of projects. So I can't give you the exact answer. I could give you an answer for this situation, but I think it's a matter of looking at the context as always and trying to look at that balance that you need. But coaches and training are a key part.
The quality of the coaches also plays a big role. I've seen organizations being coached by coaches that had a very narrow agenda. Sort of, I don't really care what you're doing in this organization. I'm going to teach you Scrum the right way, and you're going to do under my coaching Scrum the right way. It's hit and miss. You know, they may have quite some successes, and then they hit some roadblock with this attitude. Coaches that are maybe a little bit more experienced and are more reflective and actually explore and try to understand more what is the local culture, what is the history, what are the big blocking points, what is some of the politics that's going on, can have a much more subtle but long-term, much more effective approach to their coaching. So the quality of the coaching will also play a big role. In terms of training, I have to say that unfortunately a lot of training that I've seen, that I've helped develop when I was at Rational and that I've delivered, seemed now retrospectively a long collection of recipes. You know, do this and then do that, and this is good, and here are the 5 steps to do something. This is effective very short term, but actually there's some more effective training that is more akin to education, if you understand the difference I make between training and education, is to give people the tools so that they can reflect themselves on what are the right steps. So giving them ammunition, intellectual tools, so that they can reason about the recipes. Now you need a combination of both, because you cannot be sort of just in the abstract, but you'll need to sort of oscillate between being analytic and reflective about the recipes and then delivering some of the recipes and even trying the recipes for real and so on. So there is this delicate balance between through 3 levels. Alistair Coburn, a famous agilist, used to tell us a long story about shu, ha, ri. And he has the 3 nice kanji character for it. Shu is when you learn, you know, the basic ropes on how to do things. And then you get good at doing it by some practice. Ha, you start to be reflective on how you do the thing. And ri is really the master level where you go into uncharted territory and try new things. And we should at least aim at having coaches that are at the ha level. We cannot just have coaches that are at the shu level only. And if you're very lucky, some of the coaches would be at the 3rd level and will actually try to invent new things that are specifically adapted to your circumstances, that are not, you know, chapter 17 in the book by the guru.
For what I see, I mean, it's thinking about, we were talking about setting an agile or starting agile in a large project. We were questioning about that. We were also thinking about coaching and so on. And I think that the key is to get the company buy-in from the inside. I mean, the best coaching and the best training that you can do is to success with an agile project inside a company, because the rest of the company will follow. I mean, it's just a way to and probably that doesn't mean to okay, let's search for the more complex and the bigger project in the company, let's apply agile. So it will be an example for it. I think it doesn't matter. I mean, it's just take a sample on a company and apply the most successfully way agile. Probably it depends on choosing the best project, and the company will turn to the benefits of the project and will say, okay, let's do agile in the other ones. So I think that's one of the points. It's getting the company buy-in. It's the best training you can do. And I was also thinking that the second step, the first step is to do that, and the second step is let's go to the company, thinking about software development company methodology. Let's go to the methodology. Let's go to the. I was even thinking about the enterprise architecture definition that they may have. Maybe it's because I was talking about that, but it's a way to get in. It's a way to enrich, to improve the definition of their standards. Maybe not to change it, but to widen those standards, allowing the company to do in the way you learn with the first project.
Okay.
Well, I completely agree with the first part of your intervention. The best way to get confident, to get faith in Agile is to do a little project with a lot of success. And we try coaching there in Telefonica Research and Development, and they works really well. So I don't know if there is some magic value to give Agile into the company, but I feel that a little sample with a lot of success is the better idea.
But again, I can give counter-example to that. It all depends how desperate you are. There's this company in Kamloops, a small city not far from Vancouver. Well, they basically changed completely the way they did software development in 6 months. They did let's change everything at once. But they were, on the way to get bankrupt, so they had no choice. So when you're really desperate, they didn't have time to do a little bit of a pilot project for 6 months with some training and some coaching, and then we'll have bigger project and we'll unroll things gradually over the whole organization over a matter of 2 or 3 years. They were doing a massive change or just put the key under the mat and export all the software development somewhere else where it's... So it depends how big is the pain.
I think we also have to be a little careful about, in comillas, Scrum Master. 2 days course is not a Scrum Master. And we see a little bit of that around too. I'm a Scrum Master. You went to a 2-day course? Great.
You went to a 2-day course and you still had a pulse on the way out.
Yes. Yes, it has to be a little more than that. So the experience part, I think, is something that's, it's hard, we know this is hard to teach, right? How do you teach somebody the experience they need to help others in situations that they've never been in? That's hard. This is your 3-level.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have talked about helping teams or helping an organization to reflect themselves. That in fact is one of the bases of Agile, being able to improve continuously. In this kind of projects, or from your experience, which kind of tools could help to reflect themselves? What kind of tricks have you seen that helps a lot to change the way people work or to change practices?
Let me start while you're thinking. I can see your brain moving around. There are several. There are several things I think that are important in terms of tools, but I think a lot of them are intellectual tools, not physical tools as such.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the change in mentality that has to happen is when people start to work in a different style and think in a different style. I think they begin to operate differently. And the sort of anti-pattern that we often see is some sort of agile program is forced on a group that never wanted to do it, that never bought into it. They didn't get object-oriented design. They didn't get component-based design. They didn't get service-oriented design. And now we think they're going to be agilists. It's not going to happen. They fought against it for lots of reasons, culturally, historically, whatever. So you have to try and understand how to get something that will get their attention, that will help them to think this is going to help them in their role, to understand what they do better, to deliver more effectively, to be more efficient, and then start to build from that. So it's that sort of intellectual set of tools and capabilities that become critical. And of course, there are other tools that can help support what they do, but I think it's that thinking that is the key.
Mm-hmm.
So there are great tools. We used to call them post-mortem and debriefing. Now they're called retrospective, and they're probably about the same kind of thing. But you have to use them really, not just do them, cargo cult again. So I was looking at what happened in an organization that didn't get too successful with agile stuff. And I looked at their retrospective, and the retrospective were the same thing, every 3 weeks or something like that. They were gathering for 2 hours, and they had the post-it notes and the yellow ones and the green ones and the minutes and things like that. But they were reporting the same thing again and again. And actually, they almost, one of them told me, the retrospective, it's boring. We are just, gathering around the table and we say the same thing, every month. That's the problem, You end up doing things because, it's part of being agile, we have to have a retrospective. But if you actually don't reflect why are we having it, and Is there, maybe we should stop doing them if they are ineffective, or maybe we should start doing something real about the thing that we identify. And then the reason why the project failed was nowhere in the minutes of those retrospectives. So I say, well, you knew that this was going to happen. And this is another phenomenon, it's not cargo cult, it's called the elephant in the room. Everybody knew that there was this big looming problem. Everybody was busy doing his own thing, ignoring the elephant, hoping that somebody will take care of the elephant. So you have all these people happily doing their right thing, and we're doing the retrospective and the daily stand-up meeting, and we ignore the elephant in the room. It's not just going to go away. So, you have to go beyond just, doing all the steps. You have to face the reality and take action. And in that project I have in mind, a medium-sized company in Vancouver, there was, we've been doing all the right thing. Yes, but you've ignored the elephant in the room.
And what about, talking about big projects, I think a really interesting point is how to plan big projects. When you have several teams, or even if they are distributed across the world. Have you any advice, concrete advice about this? About what is the more important things to take into account when planning for big projects?
In general, I assume you mean big projects that will end up being delivered in an agile way. Is that?
So delivering projects in an agile way.
Well, in our experience, we've gone through because we have fairly large teams working on large products. Part of the challenge is, how do we create teams of teams? How do those teams work together to deliver something that is obviously a combination of things that are being produced? And we've gone through a series of ways of looking at this organizational structure and planning of this approach, from being focused on components, this is the team that does that component, this is the team that does that component, to looking more on features. You're not responsible for a component, you're responsible for a set of features that might get delivered in several components that might be part of several products. And now we're sort of in a sort of blended situation where the challenge for us is not so much the components or the features or the product, it's delivering, in quotes, a workbench which solves a problem for a client, which might not be one product, and certainly is a combination of features, and certainly is a combination of many components. And how we treat those different levels for us has changed significantly over the last 2 or 3 years. And we've sort of reorganized. Each time we've learned about what it means to be a component-based team, we've changed to become a feature-based team, we've changed to become a product-based team, and now we're changing to become these sorts of solution-based teams, if we can call them that. And that itself has been quite painful for us. And if anybody who knows that the major release of our set of products was sort of delayed recently because it was reaching this final level of realizing, how do you create a set of products that must work together, yet still have agile teams that can do things independently? And that's very much in conflict if you're not very careful about the organization and the planning. And part of, I think, what we've learned is there were some things that our teams were doing that were good agile practices we've sort of unlearned over the last 12 months as we've pushed towards deadlines and pushed towards product-focused delivery, that we're trying to relearn again as we realize it's not about products, it's about solutions that solve problems. And for us, that change of thinking has again been very significant for us. A long story, but we can talk another time if you're interested in organizational aspects about teams.
And do you think it's more difficult to plan when having feature teams that in the classical way?
It's more difficult in the sense of if your idea of a project plan is a Gantt chart and a work breakdown structure and that's it, and a green, red status meeting, then you're dead. You're never going to be able to survive that way. If you've got teams that are using sprints and replanning and retrospectives, you're going to have to manage in a different way. So we've had to go through a different sort of training session for our project planners and managers that look at what planning is from a different point of view. That it's about projecting a direction and steering and managing the change of direction as the project proceeds, not about setting something up front and then having a fixed set of resources managing a work breakdown structure in a Gantt chart. So it's a different philosophy for how we plan and manage.
But this,
Yeah. What was I about to say is that actually in a large project there's probably 3 levels of planning. I was mentioning 2 this morning because that's the typical iteration process is like that. But very often with the 3 levels, and they use very different tools, but they need to be sort of kept in sync. They cannot be done by totally different people that never speak to each other, never looked into each other. Plan boards or other things with cards and post-it notes are probably very suitable for one, but not for the higher level ones. The key thing, I think, is that a lot of people who've been trained in all the good things from a project management perspective, they know mostly work breakdown structures and Gantt chart and CPM and things like that, and they have the golden hammer. You know, everything looks like a plan that I'm going to solve with Microsoft project. Actually, there's a course for industry in Vancouver, which is, you know, only about how to use Microsoft project to solve everything. It's probably the last tool you need in software development project. You know, pretty good for construction, you know, but I'm not sure it's the right thing for software projects. So finding the right tool for each of the 3 levels and making sure that information from these tools, at least at the hinge point, are being shared and in real time when things start to be out of, you know, alignment, being, you know, having the means to propagate that is very important. Very often people who have been trained in the classical way of doing planning, they do, well, we need to do this massive effort in planning, and then that's it. We can sit down and just watch the plan being implemented, you know, and bang our fist on the table, oh, you know, we are getting late. Well, maybe the plan is wrong. You know, it's not that we're getting late, you know.
okay, I would like to give the public the chance to ask questions for the panel. Okay.
I'm a constant one. I'm Javier Zazano. I've asked before. I wanted to raise a question, and excuse me if this is perhaps a too local issue, but I think that it's relevant for this kind of forum. In Spain, as far as I know, there is relatively little product development and a lot of system development. And this is about the problems with promoting Agile you were talking before. When we talk about system development, we have a provider, we have a customer, and if you go to the customer, and this is us, in our case, in Telefónica, the customer will say, okay, Agile, what I want is to know what I'm buying, how much I'm paying, and when I'm getting it. Because if I want to buy a switch, a router, I know how much I'm paying, I know what I'm getting, and I know when I'm receiving it. And don't ever dream about picking one of my kids and taking him with the developers, because I have a lot of work and I don't want to spend one people in another person's work. On the other hand, we have the providers. And the providers, they may say, okay, it's wonderful to have Agile because we optimize the resources, people is happier, and we know about some providers who say, for example, the good idea with Agile is that we don't have to renegotiate the contract for every single change request. But then the bosses say, no, we want change requests because our business case is in the change requests. We usually make offers at a low price, but we charge a lot in the modifications. So I think that there is this split that makes it difficult to promote Agile, because Agile is a lot about connecting requests, business needs with development, but we have this split in the middle. And I would like to know, what do you think about this? And especially, and this will be for IBM, there are lots of tools, but perhaps the best tool for this problem will be a good contract or a good contract model. Don't know what do you have for this.
Maybe I'll start then. There are a couple of things. One of the things I think Philippe brought up is about the broad applicability of Agile and agility. So for example, there's a lot of talk and a lot of action going on around what we might call Agile acquisition. Some people call it evolutionary acquisition. It's stuff that's been done in the military for a while, where they've had this perpetual problem where they put a contract out. By the time they let the contract, the technology for which they've let the contract is already obsolete. They're already warehousing parts, before they've even got to developing the solution. So they recognized this for some time. And I think part of what's happening is there's becoming an education of the consumer that says you can't go through this traditional cycle of consumption in the way that we did. I mean, we're finding it the same way with the consumer electronics that we buy. We expect them to be updatable. That's part of what we do now when we buy a handheld device of any kind. We expect that we don't have to either throw it away every 3 months, maybe we do. We don't have to throw it away every 3 months, but we can update it with new functionality, new capability, new applications, whatever it is, to make this device more personalized and also to become more effective as my life changes in different ways, that I can continue to use it. So I think we're starting to see consumer behavior change. And the second thing is about the contract. Part of that is not just make a good contract, and there's a lot of things in the literature and so on about what it means to contract for outsourced supply and agile situations, but also how do you manage that relationship? So for example, one of the things we're doing, actually it's between Japan and China, is there's a lot of offshoring from Japan to China, particularly a lot of government kind of work, and there are these huge development parks in China. So a lot of what they're trying to do is create, if you like, an outsourcer's workbench that says, I want to be able to negotiate a contract with you quickly, to be able to understand what we're agreeing to, what those terms are, to be able to update that contract as necessary between the two parties, the outsourcer and the outsourcee, to manage the contract with what the terms and conditions are, the delivery conditions, the sign-off conditions, and to do that in a very dynamic environment. So there's technology around how you do that. How does the outsourcer and the outsourcee connect and collaborate in these quite complicated relationships that they have between governments, between departments, when there's subcontractors. So there's a lot of work around just doing that, for example. So I think there's a lot going on, I think, that will change in that environment.
I think one of the fundamental issue there is that we are, the people who are doing acquisition are using the wrong paradigm. We do not bid for software like we can bid for trucks. The trucks, we know what they will be. We know that the difference will be in how efficient they are in manufacturing the trucks, but the features between the Volvo trucks and the Mercedes trucks and the DAF trucks are relatively limited. They all have a steering wheel on the left-hand side and things like that. And the trucks, they exist already when you do the bid. Software is of a very different nature. You're buying in some way something that doesn't exist yet. So the idea that we could compare, a low bidder and a high bidder, we're comparing on something completely inexistent at the time we bid. So we have to more bid on the quality of the people that are doing the work, and we should actually not look at the price and the list of features, but we should, if I'm the buyer, I would like to know who are you to develop that software? What's your track record? How will I know over time that you're going to do the right thing? Do I get signals about that's what I should be interested in? So we need to educate the people on the buying side. Procurement agencies in big banks and insurance companies and government agencies at various levels of government into software is a different beast than asphalt on the road and tiles on the roofs and
this is very difficult, though. I mean, many of you perhaps have been in situations where there's been two bids and they want to go with the one that isn't the cheapest. And it's very hard to say, this is why that one is worth more money. It's very difficult to do.
When you're buying software, you don't buy lines of code that have been manufactured somewhere in a software factory. You're buying actually expertise in advance.
Well, the problem is that probably, for instance, for us, the telco managers, because of the existence of the framework we present in my presentation, have some kind of feel that the pieces, the software that they are trying to buy exists, like a truck, in some way, because he expects that to configure the network or to do the billing or whatever is a very concrete work and need to be defined, and don't understand that can be very different from one platform or one technology to another, or the integration with the web portal is so complicated, or whatever complexity.
But there is this other direction, which is about if you want something that's customized, change your requirements and get something that's standardized. And there's a big push, of course, towards, from Nicholas Carr and, does IT matter, and delivering software as a utility to say use standard things. SAP is an obvious example. So, for example, even in the US, they changed the federal acquisition regulations, the FARs and the DFARs, the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulations, to say if you're asking for something and it needs custom software, wherever possible, you change your requirements to ask for something standard so that we can get it cheaper. And it's a very interesting mindset shift that says, why does it need to be custom? Is this differentiating you? If not, why don't you just get a standardized way of doing this? Now, this is a simplification of a large problem, but there's a big push in that direction, of course, which is why packaged application companies and so on are important to us.
Yeah, but that will always represent a certain part of software development. It cannot cover everything.
But the question is, why can't that part be larger?
Yeah.
Hello, I'm Amaya Alberdi. I have a question regarding hours of work. I've been working in Germany for 10 years, and I just started here in Spain. And in Germany, they had regulation that we were banned from working more than 10 hours a day. Mm-hmm. While here, I'm being looked at because I'm leaving the office after 10 hours work. And I was wondering whether maybe Agile, you think, could change that, or is something that has to do with Spain and Spanish people?
It's interesting. The last time I gave a course a little while ago in Germany, and we were coming up to the 5 o'clock when we were supposed to finish, and I hadn't quite finished the slides, as I never do. So at 10 minutes after 5, I finished. The next morning at 9 o'clock, a group of people came to me and said, last night you finished late. You're supposed to finish at 5 o'clock. Today we will leave at 5. That was my warning that they were not going to stay late anymore. It was very odd, it's both cultural and it's legal, of course. It's a legal situation. The reason why we can't fire people in Italy and move them to India is because of regulations. If we fire them in Stockholm, we have to give them 2 years' salary. There's all sorts of regulations that affect how we think about labor, the way people work, and so on. In terms of agility and whether this affects people's attitude to work, I think there is a relationship that I think you mentioned to me earlier on about different cultures and different local regulations and how they look at ideas like agility, whether they value themselves in terms of how much can I get done today and I'll work the longest I can to reach a certain point versus, I'm here because it's my job and I'll do what I need to do to fulfill the requirements of my job, but that's it. And I think there's a whole set of interesting dynamics that go on in different cultures around that is very different from even countries in Europe, let alone between Asia, Europe, and North America. So I think it does affect what agility means and how you apply it, very much so.
The way people perceive the use of their own time, well, it's all a matter. Are you paid by the hour? So you just do the hours and you leave at 5? Or are you paid to achieve a certain objective? If you're paid to achieve a certain objective, do you have control over the definition of how much time it should take to achieve this objective? Or is that imposed to you by some other people? So if you're paid to achieve some objective and not by the hour, but somebody else estimates that you should be done in so many hours and you're not, well, in order to look good and not lose your job, you're going to extend that. So this is why I see these Japanese people still being at the office at 11 and sleeping in the corner Levu Oteru, as they call it. But I'm not sure that overall they are more productive than my compatriots in France, who are also limited to the number of hours they can stick in the office. So the way Agile's changed things a little bit is maybe by putting a little bit more focus on the people and involving the people in making the decision, rather than having just command and control, things, fall down from the top, in terms of defining how things are being done, in which sequence they are being done, and who's doing it, and all that kind of thing. So you were mentioning, or somebody else was mentioning, that the daily stand-up meeting can be a way to sort of, oh yeah, it looks like you're stuck on this one, let's redistribute the work. So that's little tactical decision that can be made relatively easily in a matter of 5 seconds, as opposed to having something that is, sort of command and control kind of thing. Now, this doesn't stop people from being almost masochistic. Sort of, look who's put the more hours in this project. I've worked 80 hours, every week solid for the last 2 years. Okay, maybe, but if that's a lifestyle that you enjoy, maybe you should continue like that. So we had, people like that at Rational in California that had no life. So some of the agile mentality may change things in small ways, but it's not going to make you work 8 hours instead of 10.
What I can say is that when in Telefonica research and development start to do agile, the people go to home later.
But is it because they enjoy what they're doing a little bit more? Maybe that's the case. If you enjoy something, you don't see the time flies, as we say in French. Sort of, oh wow, it's already 7. Should be home.
I think you also feel a bit more personal ownership and responsibility as well, which is a big part of this kind of whole team thinking and meritocracies and the way in which you collaborate. That's what we found in our organizations, is people felt more like they were part of it, and that affects their behavior, of course, usually in very positive ways. It doesn't always mean you have to work 14 hours a day, but if people feel more responsive, they feel like they're being listened to, they feel like if there are changes to be made, they can make them, they feel if they're overloaded, that the balance can take place, then people feel more involved.
And eliminating time wasters. Why should we have 7 people around the table for that meeting when 3 people are having the discussion? The other ones are there, polishing their nail, writing little notes in their handbook, playing with their iPhone under the table, There's 4 people who are just not useful here.
I can't say anything. I work for an organization that's very large with a lot of people in the middle. I feel it every day.
Okay, if there are no more questions. One more question.
No. Okay. Maybe last one, because I know somebody has to take a flight.
Yes.
And it's a little bit nervous. Tries not to be, but pretends not to be, but is.
I should be.
Okay, thank you.
In 3 hours.
This is not really a question, okay? It's I would like to just to share with you another example about how difficult it is to convince the people to introduce this kind of practices or methodologies in the software development. In another context, you have been talking all the time about the companies, the industrial software development, etc., etc. But my case is quite different. Okay, I work on a project for a consortium made up by 9 European universities. So I work with researchers. Okay, not exactly developers, but researchers in the that is the computer science researchers. Okay, in the ontology and semantic domain. And 10 months ago, when during a meeting, when I present a proposal
about collaborative software development infrastructure with a lot of extreme programming practices, agile, etc. Do you know which was the first reaction? Are you crazy, man? Are you crazy? But 10 months later, the most of all those people who told me if I was crazy, currently they are really happy using this infrastructure and seeing that the sustainability of this platform when the project finish is now more feasible. So at the first time, the reaction was, this is impossible, this is, you are crazy, etc., etc. But 10 months later, the reaction is totally different. So
I think for us too, that one of the reasons for doing jazz.net and all of those things is people have to see it to believe it. Yeah. You know, no lo veo, no lo creo. You know, it's the same sort of view.
Yes, this is exactly my case.
Yeah. So one of the reasons for making this very transparent was to say, how can teams of several hundred people or teams of 50 or 20 actually work in this way and see good results? Show us. So for example, we have a lot of situations where we take people just to see our teams working and see what they're doing on a daily basis. We have teams in Paris and Zurich. We have teams in lots of locations around North America and elsewhere. And often we just have people in webinars or talking to those folks much more than we ever did. And that's the best advertisement or the best way of looking at why these things work, is to see a team working and to use that experience.
Okay.
So you have a good, if I may, if you have a good experience there, and it would be a good idea to publicize and make your good experience visible, and especially analyzing a little bit what was special in your context. Unfortunately, in software engineering, we suffer from something. We are totally unable to reflect, analyze, and publish our failures. We hide them. We just move along and pretend it never existed. And this is not a good way to make our industry evolve. So usually people tell me, oh, this would be bad publicity for blah, whatever blah is, you know, maybe an agile method. No, it's a good thing. This is how we can make progress. How do you think that medicine has made progress? By ignoring all the people who died because they were misdiagnosed or had, you know, the wrong thing happen to them? No, medicine makes progress by accumulating evidence, positive and negative evidence. And we are extremely bad in software at reflecting on our failures and our mistakes.
Good point, very good point. I would like to thank the panelists for being here today, giving so many tips to the audience. And we were glad to have you today. And for the audience, I hope you found the panel interesting. And it's all. Thank you very much.
Just as a closing, I think you're going to stay there before, yes, before you leave. This is for...
Thank you so much.
This is for Alan, that you missed your turn, but still you have the new opportunity.
I have one here, I got two.
And you, oh man. So
maybe you...
No, I have one. Perhaps you haven't.
No, but I'm taking a flight. Okay. They won't let me. I would have to leave it with the security people.
We can... Yes, we'll raffle it.
So, well, yes, thank you, because I know somebody's really in haste. Thank you, the present speakers in general, panelists and speakers in general for their talks and contribution. It has been, I think, terribly interesting and terribly exciting. Also to all the participants, really, because I think that that's part of the event, and we're really very grateful to all of you. All the organization hope that you have found this event interesting, and we try to have more for you. Thank you very much.